Welcome to Victoria Rumble Room, a show that endeavors to bring you highlights of things happening in British Columbia, in Canada, in the wide world. I'm Robin Adair, and across town, my partner in crime, the Croatian sensation, the world's most interesting man, or at least Saanich's most interesting man, John Jurisic. And John, Saanich is taking it on the chin. Bank robbery. We have two young men go into a Bank of Montreal. They hold everyone at gunpoint. They rob the place, and then they have a shootout with police until they are killed. I mean, how does this sort of thing happen? It's certainly what the country is talking about.
Are they ever? And, crimes occur. Bank robberies occur. Thefts occur at stores with guns, with knives. But this one is of a particular unique insanity, okay? It's at the Bank of Montreal in Saanich, and boy, oh boy, we saw extraordinary people do extraordinarily heroic things. A whole community is grateful to the Saanich Police and the Greater Victoria Emergency Response Team. They ran, video shows, they ran into the hail of gunfire, which these two insane maniacs seem to enjoy doing. 6 people were wounded, 6 officers were wounded, 3 quite seriously, and we still really don't know the extent of those injuries. And they kept on coming and coming until the threat was eliminated. These are real heroes in our books. Obviously, everyone on the island, in Canada, and the world feels the same way, Robin. The contribution number keeps rising on the special GoFundMe page. I mean, it started at 100 grand. It's now close to $200,000 to support these injured police officers and help their families. That is an amazing community response. People are really upset about what happened on Southern Vancouver Island, and we are still looking for answers. We don't know why, we don't know how, we don't know so many things, Robin.
There's so many things we don't know, John, and there's new information coming out, it seems, on a daily basis, and I'm sure that's going to be happening for a while. What we do know is Isaac and Matthew Ocharloni were 22-year-old twins. In fact, they are triplets. They have a sister as well. She is not part of this. They are from Duncan. They went to high school in Mill Bay. Many questions. How were they radicalized? Why didn't anyone see this coming? Lots of clues on their website, which has now been taken down. They were anti-vaxxers, anti-mandate, anti-Trudeau, and pro-gun. They were big pro-gun, and one of them actually even tried to get into the Canadian Armed Forces and didn't make the grade. An eyewitness at the bank, a woman by the name of Shelley Fryer, said the robbers seemed very calm when they were there. They were almost strolling around the bank, and they didn't try to get away quickly. They didn't try to get to their getaway car. It seemed like they were actually waiting for police, which begs the question, was this a bit of a copycat? I mean, had they endeavored to try to do the same thing that happened in 1997 at the West Hollywood, bank robbery and shooting? Was this their template?
Suspects inside, possible AK-47s are wearing ski masks and dark clothing.
The other suspect was just walking around in the parking lot. He was making no attempt to hide or take cover. He was just standing out there and taking everything we were shooting at him. It didn't seem to bother him. It was like a bear at a beehive. Our rounds didn't seem to be bothering him. He never forgot where you were. I mean, if you shot at him, he would turn around and just spray 50 rounds in your direction.
Everybody stay down. The weapon automatic fire. They're planning the area with fire. Shot fired.
There's a criminal mind and then sort of a normal mind, and an enormous amount of study goes into how one gets a criminal mind. How do you do bad things? How do you kill people? So clearly we're wondering, how did this happen? How could such hatred of police and society have developed? We're not going to figure that out. So there's going to be much study on these folks, on how they got to this point. But, they were young men. There was a whole life ahead of them. They were actually part of triplets. and leave a sister and a family behind to try to figure out how this went wrong. That family has no life now for the rest of their lives, in my humble opinion. Was this brainwashing through the internet? Was this undetected mental illness? We have so many questions, Robin. I don't even know where to start.
I know, John, and you know, I thought maybe we'd get a little perspective on this whole situation by somebody who was very close to all of this on the day of the robbery. I'm talking about Paul Arnold, who's a good friend of both of ours, and he lives in the Cedar Hill, Mount Ptolemy area. He was actually down there doing some banking and was going to go across the street, and then he saw the blockades going up to stop the traffic. He saw the police gathering, and he paints a very bleak picture of what happened. And he also reminds us very clearly of the valor of our police.
Okay, when I first encountered this incident, I was over on Cedar Hill Crossroad, and I drove down Cedar Hill Crossroad, and the police, two SUVs came and barricaded off the road. I went, what is going on, with their lights blaring and everything? And then another 3 or 4 SUVs came over there by the Patago, and they blocked that street off. And then all the police got out with their full protective gear. It was amazing how quickly it all transpired. I mean, they must have had a great communication network going, because there was a groups coming from every direction instantaneously. But the police went down the sidewalk, and as soon as they turned into the Bank of Montreal, that's when the gunfire started. And I saw the police falling. I mean, they were hit immediately as soon as they came around that corner.
Right. So where did you go when the gunfire started?
I was standing here, and there was a young lady beside me, and when the bullets started flying, I said, "We got to get down." So we dropped down here behind these bushes, and then there was maybe 30 seconds of gunfire. So we laid down here, and there was a truck right there, and I said, as soon as the gunfire stops, we're getting behind that truck.
Right.
So that's what we did. There was a black truck right there. And these guys were obviously waiting for them, and were anticipating a firefight. But I thought they behaved very professionally, but it's so unfortunate that when the shooting started, I mean, those 6 officers were hit immediately.
Now, you were saying there was a lot of courage being shown by those officers. We keep hearing things out of places like Texas where there was caution on the officers to go in when there was a gunman. In this situation, you saw policemen actually running into danger.
There was no hesitation on their part at all. They were a group, and they were behaving like a team, and there was no hesitation at all. They all went together and met the problem face on. I think my understanding, I spoke with a police officer the next day, and my understanding is that the work the police did really contributed to saving those lives. You know.
Now, you're a fair distance from the bank from here, but you still felt kind of threatened by it.
I sure did, man. It was machine gun fire, and you know, when it stopped and I got up, there were people all over the parking lot behind cars.
And when you see that kind of activity and you see that kind of courage, what does it make you think about when you hear about people wanting to defund the police?
Well, I think it's crazy. You know, I mean, in this day and age, our world is getting more and more complicated and more dangerous, and you know, with all the street drug problems and everything else, I mean, if we anything, we need more police, not less police, and defunding it is just ludicrous, in my opinion.
And I guess on the other side of it, we have this need for more funding for mental health. We don't know yet the story about these gunmen, why these twins from Duncan did this. It seems pretty savage, but you have to wonder whether if there was more mental health treatment in our society, some of this could be stopped.
Yeah, well, mental health is a real problem, Robin. It's gotten worse with this COVID thing. You know, people are, you know, they're struggling and feeling very badly about themselves. I think mental health is a real serious problem. The problem is how do you identify it? You know, and if you do identify it, then how do you treat it? You know, sometimes it's very difficult to treat. I have personal experience with that very thing.
So random acts of violence are still going to happen no matter what, and that's why you need police.
Absolutely. You need plan. I mean, I do agree with the idea of having a kind of a division of the police force that deals strictly with mental health issues, you know. So if a call is made that deals with somebody that's got mental health problems, I don't see any reason why you can't have both. The policeman that protects the public and the person that deals with the mental health crisis.
So I really want to say this about our police men and women. They were real heroes. But they weren't the only heroes on the scene, John. There were other people that did courageous things. Shelley Fryer in the bank was laying on the floor, and she somehow got a hold of her cell phone and whispered into it that they were being robbed. She took a real risk and needs to be commended for that bravery. And Paul Arnold himself, as he explained, he saw the problem. There was a young woman beside him. He grabbed her arm and took her behind a hedge, and then after that, a car. I mean, he was thinking that I need to protect this person. He was doing the courageous thing. He was doing the brave things that heroes do.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more with you, Robin. I'm so appreciative of these people under enormous stress. You just never know how you're going to react. And heroes emerged out of this terrible situation. I am beginning to wonder what is the linkage to some of this insanity that's going down south. Okay. Are we collectively here breaking down our trust in each other and in government? Is that sick seepage from the US starting to come up, driven so effectively by that insane maniac and criminal Donald Trump? Isn't this, is some of this becoming part of our Canadian society? I hope not. It's a big worry, but it could. Gun violence hits the States all the time. Other US policies are also having an effect on our society. I'm worried, Robin. I'm worried.
Well, we don't have the same access to guns that they have in the United States, but obviously people can get them illegally. We don't know how the twins got their guns. I'm sure all of this will be revealed, but we do know that a lot of influence comes north of the border from the things we see in the media, the things we hear about from our American neighbors, and it's a worry. And, we have the United States Supreme Court very recently throwing out Roe v. Wade, which takes away the women's right to choose if or not she's going to have an abortion. And the United States is terribly divided right now on many social issues. And this is really being felt in Canada. So we turn to Victoria criminal lawyer Roxanne Helm and put to her a question that many people are asking.
And there's always a feeling in Canada that somehow we're reactive to whatever people do in the US. Do you think that is an unnecessary fear, or are there things that we should be on guard for in this country to ensure women's rights?
I would like, frankly, to assure people in Canada that we do not have to worry that this law in the States is going to permeate into Canada. It is not. I would like to hear our political leaders telling us that, reassuring us of that, as opposed to using the issue as a bit of a political football, frankly. The law in Canada is clear. The law is not that a woman has a constitutional right to an abortion, but she has a constitutional right to be free from a law preventing her from having an abortion.
Henry Morgentaler was doing abortions, was going to jail. There was a lot of legal wrangling around him. What difference did his actions and the actions taken against him make to this picture?
Well, what Roe v. Wade came down in the States in 1973. In the late 70s, Dr. Morgentaler went to jail in Canada. He was convicted under the criminal code for procuring abortions illegally, went to jail, appealed to the Supreme Court of Canada and lost. In 1982, we got the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, and that changed everything. And the Supreme Court of Canada cast in stone in 1988 the law in abortion, as it impacts abortion in Canada. And the then Chief Justice of Canada, Chief Justice Dixon, concurred in by Justice Lemaire, who became a subsequent Chief Justice, said this, and I'll read it, it's really strong wording. Forcing a woman by threat of criminal sanction to carry a fetus to term unless she meets certain criteria unrelated to her own priorities and aspirations, is a profound interference with a woman's body and thus a violation of security of the person.
There are a lot of women out there that are not pro-choice. They are saying they believe very strongly that human life begins with conception, and they see people having abortions as a terrible thing. Many of them it's for religious reasons, not all. So what you're saying really isn't that people are being encouraged to use abortion as a method of birth control. What you're saying is that women should have the right within their own conscience, their own religion, their own tradition to make the decision for themselves.
100%. And that's the point. People have the right to make the decision for themselves. So I may have my opinion. Frankly, our political leaders have their opinions. I'm not really interested in hearing what they are. That's for me, and it's for the woman who finds herself in the position of having an unwanted, unplanned pregnancy to make that decision for herself without judgment from anyone else. And of course, it goes even beyond unplanned and unwanted pregnancy, but pregnancy that is for various reasons, the baby has got severe problems. The fetus has got severe issues that maybe it would be a viable birth, but not a viable life, for example. There's all kinds of issues. It's an issue in my respectful submission, and Chief Justice Dixon and Chief Justice Lemaire agreed for the woman in consultation with her doctor to decide.
So well articulated by Roxanne Helm. It's important to understand and reason and know that Canada is setting its own course, that we are a separate country, despite amazing similarities. Although there may remain many outside influences, the same could be said about our economy. I mean, gun control, violence, insanity, economy, so many similarities between our countries. What about some kind of explanation of what that is? We have sky-high inflation, try to say that 3 times, and spiking fuel costs, and some of the most expensive housing on the planet, like in the universe, Robin. Where are we heading with all of this? What are the connections? What are we to think about was going to happen around Christmas time this year? Therefore, we thought it an excellent time to check in with Senior Wealth Advisor Rod Mart from Wellington Altus. Let's zoom him in.
Now joining us in the Victoria Rumble Room is Senior Portfolio Manager of Wellington Altus, Rod Mart, a friend of the show, and great to have you back again, Rod.
It's great being here, Robin. I'm happy to be here and with
Excellent.
you and John.
That's the attitude we love. We like to encourage that. And Rod, lots to talk about with the economy. Now, we've just seen the Dow Jones really taking a big hit, and they're talking about it reacting to the highest inflation rate in 40 years. How's that being felt in Canada and around the world?
Well, you're right. Of course, we are in extraordinary times right now. We have our, just to put things in context, we've had our first pandemic in 100 years, our first invasion in Europe in 75 years, first inflation around the world in 40 years, and we're going through a market correction as we speak. So it's all of these things intersecting has led to enormous volatility and change in the markets.
Rod, it's so great to see you, as Robin mentioned, so great to see you again. We certainly have been friends for many a year, back to the Gundy days, back in the 80s. I'm sure you're familiar with the fact we've been spending quite a bit of time on our show covering issues around the war in Ukraine, and therefore economics has been top of mind. I've worked and lived through 6, 7 recessions, likely the same for you. In my opinion, this is what we're in is not a recession, but the economy has structural problems that's stopping it from growing, And one of these is the war in Ukraine. So how much do you think this war is impacting markets and economies?
Well, the first thing I'd simply mention is this: is coming into 2022, inflation was already elevated, and the key ingredients for that were simply a lack of supply in key commodities and then supply chain issues. So with those two things already on the table, we then add Russia's invasion of Ukraine. So that has really exacerbated these problems on an inflationary side. We already had these, inflationary things on the board. The Russia invasion of Ukraine and the subsequent sanctions had a knock-on effect of making inflation even worse.
But fuel prices have to be top of mind in terms of how we've been directly impacted. If anybody was to say, how are you feeling the war in Ukraine? All you have to do is go down to the station and look at the expense on the pump, and you say, well, right there's some pretty keen and clear evidence.
The two biggest components of inflation, the CPI numbers, were food and fuel. Those are the big things that everyone's focusing on right now. Yeah, I think one of the figures I was looking at recently is Canadians have borrowed, and I don't know if I've got the exact number here, but for every dollar they make, they've borrowed $1.70. So we are right at the far end of borrowing. And that simply means that as interest rates go up, it puts pressure on everything from student loans, car loans, mortgages, and that will have a direct impact on consumer spending. And that's really the secret to look at right now, is what is the consumer doing? We know interest rates are high. Inflation is high. We know they're going to raise interest rates. Those are givens. The real question is, how does the consumer respond to that?
So, Rod, it sounds to me like we have a bear market and possibly a recession around the corner. Is this a good time for people to be investing their money? Is this a good time to get involved in investment? I know that most investment folks, and I'm sure you're no different, talk about the long term. You don't invest for the short term, you invest for the long term. Is this a safe time to park your money? And I think people for a long time are just parking it in real estate and just watching it blast ahead. But I wonder if those days aren't over and it's now time to start looking again at the market.
So you mentioned something interesting, bear market. So a bear market, just by definition, is any correction that goes into a negative 20% category. So to answer your question, my philosophy with regard to investing is you want to have some equities, you want to have some bonds, you want to have some real estate, but you don't want to be overweighted in any one area. So we're currently in our, I always believe that when you're building a portfolio, say, for example, inflation is now the big talking point, but the time to really prepare for inflation was a year before it occurred. We're going to be on the other side of that trade, and in the coming days, weeks, or months, we will be buyers of this weakness, because we do believe that if you buy good companies that are trading down 20-30% with clean balance sheets, tremendous free cash flow, that's the sort of business that I want to own 3 years from now, 5 years from now, and 10 years. And I think that's the lens that most investors should look at.
Well, looks like a recession is certainly on the way. The economy goes up, the economy comes down. We're in a downward trend at the moment. Let's hope things don't last that long and things do turn around. We'll cross our fingers and check in, I'm sure, in the near future with our economic experts. But let's shift the dial over to something a little more positive, John. A week or so ago, we rang in another anniversary of the nation's foundation. Canada Day was a big event, celebrated everywhere, including downtown Victoria. Yeah. Fireworks looked great, big crowds out all over the city for various events, and it felt great. And joining into that, and we're moving right back to our honoring the police, the Victoria Police Force actually put together a celebratory video.
Well, let's hope for a great summer of balance, a great summer of stability. I'm somehow not entirely optimistic, but my fingers are crossed, Robin. By the way, before I wrap up, next week we're going to have a chance to talk with Langford Mayor Stu Young, and ex-Langford Fire Chief Bob Beckett about their trip to Ukraine. We feel honored to be chatting with them. There's going to be a lot of heartfelt dialogue, I'm sure, that we will have on our show next week. So please tune in. And how do you tune in? You're going to go naturally. How do I tune in?
How do you do that? How do you do that?
I want to watch that, right?
Tell me and our many viewers how you do it.
Exactly. The heartbeat of the Rumble Room is our Facebook page. And the addresses of all of these platforms are now surrounding us, Robin. There is an active Twitter page. Oh, by the way, on our last show, Facebook comments were over 50 plus. Lots of action there. If you have a bunch of spare time to hear about how people are really thinking about these issues, come to our links. We host all of these interviews on our YouTube site. And of course, we allow your viewpoint to be primarily expressed through our Facebook news and views group. And we are on Instagram, and we're also on TikTok. So as always, I remain the most, the most interesting person, it appears, in my house on Tulip Avenue and the Croatian sensation. Remaining humbly yours, my name is John Jurisic.
And I'm Robin Adair, and I'm also humble because guess what? It rhymes with rumble, and rumble on!